What made you realize there was something off about your friend's significant other? I met them as an already married couple, and everything seemed fine until she went into labor at my house. It was her second child, so she knew it was early labor and decided to rest on our couch while we hung out. We were going to watch her older child when she went to the hospital anyway, and our house is 30 minutes closer to the hospital, so it made sense for the three of them to hang out around our house until go time. That's when my husband and I started noticing her husband's strange behavior. He was a very charming guy and a very good father to his son, but he started making fun of his wife during contractions. He would roll his eyes and tell her to shut up if she made even the slightest groan. He joked that she was a wimp and was overreacting. The whole situation got so awkward that my husband insisted he go home to get their hospital bags, just to give this poor woman a break from her crappy husband. A few months after the birth of her second child, he hit his wife with his car while she physically tried to block him from leaving during an argument. He disappeared for days and didn't come home until she proved to him that she hadn't gone to the hospital or contacted the police. Thus began systematic abuse that continued for 2 more years, and she hid from me like an expert. He would hurt her and then threaten to withhold money for groceries if she said anything to anyone. I knew he was the worst, and I knew she often needed me to pick her up to get food from food pantries because he was bad with money. But I had no idea he was hurting her. She finally left him after he threw her through a window while she was 8 months pregnant with their third child. The story doesn't end there. After the divorce, he and his friend started making very inappropriate content featuring children. He had a full-on, toddler-level temper tantrum twice at a group game night. Once because during a trivia question he couldn't remember the planets in the solar system. Then in the same night, he got ragey playing Uno, threw down his cards and stormed out. We all kind of looked at each other and our friend. That was when he knew he was off. My friends and I were all in our mid-20s and he was over 30, so it was definitely not acceptable behavior. A couple of weeks later was my friend's birthday, so we all went out for the night and ended up at our neighborhood bar. He threw another temper tantrum, I think it was overscoring for darts or something equally ridiculous, and stormed out and peeled away in his car, leaving us with no ride home. This was pre-Uber or Lyft, and none of us wanted to spend money on a taxi, so we sobered up on the 2-mile walk back to my friend's house. Thankfully, she broke up with him not long after. She's now with a wonderful guy who not only knows the planets of the solar system, but also treats her a lot better. I wonder which of the presumably many tantrums broke the camel's back in that girl's mind. How many screaming rages are too many in a relationship? He tried to feel me up at her birthday party. I tried to tell her, but she took his side. We're no longer friends. Same. My childhood best friend introduced me to her boyfriend. They hug and he makes the "I wanna lick your hoo-ha" sign with the finger V, with the tongue waving through it, over her shoulder. I told her about it and she got mad at me. They ended up breaking up because he was cheating. When will these people learn? What the frick? I tried the argument, I have nothing to gain by telling you this. He, however, does have something to gain by lying to you. It didn't matter. This was even after she had caught him cheating when they first started dating and had caught him in creepy situations like having her call him by the same nicknames an ex gave him, giving her the same clothes he had given to an ex to wear. She found pictures of the ex in the same hoodie he asked her to wear for him. When she went off on us for arranging a campsite at another friend's wedding. They got married on a 20-acre farm and the reception was on site. Instead of agreeing to split a hotel room with 1 bed between 8 people, the arrangement would have been that she got the bed and the rest of us would sleep on the floor. Yeah, no. Where to start? The double date we went on where he corrected her on the difference between UFC and MMA, and she turned into the corner of the booth and didn't talk to anyone for the rest of the night. How he wasn't allowed to hang out with me either because I was dating someone and they might have hot friends, or I was single and needed a wingman. There was this time I used my dad's truck to help them move and she got mad at me. I don't remember why, I just remember her friends doing almost nothing and then leaving before we were done. The final straw for me, I decided she was an abusive shrew long before this, was when we were working for his parents' band on the Riverboat concert. She got mad that we were hanging out, literally just talking on a small boat. She left the ring on the table and left the boat the second it docked. Unfortunately, they made up after this and have been living together for the last year. I'm hoping it ends soon. I was friends with this guy, and one day I was doing work for his mum and dad, so he came over to hang out with me while I worked. She called while he was there and he told me to be quiet. After he got off the phone, I asked why I had to be quiet and he said because he didn't want her to know that he was hanging out with me while she was at work. So I asked again. He said because she'll get mad if he knows he's having fun while she's at work. They're married now with 2 kids and I don't talk to them anymore. We played D&D with him, and it seemed like every week he'd say, "Rule number 1, don't touch the kids." He was a teacher. He always meant it as a joke, and it always made sense in context, but it didn't sit right with me. For one thing, no one thought it was funny the first time, so why call back to it? Also, the regularity with which he said it almost made it seem like a mantra to me. They arrested him last year for allegedly Snapchatting with an underage girl he met over the internet. In hindsight, there were a bunch of other warning signs too, but that was the one that initially weirded me out. My best friend's ex-boyfriend walked like he was trying to intimidate people. And every time he asked someone a question about someone's opinion, "Hey, what do you think of that statue? Do you like sauerkraut?" he'd respond to their answer with, "I had a feeling you were going to say that." It seems harmless, but it was every single time, and if you called him out on it, you couldn't possibly have known I was allergic to X. He lashed out in anger. Every time she tried to break up with him, he just cornered her and wouldn't let her leave the room until she relented. And even their couples therapist thought she should just leave him for her own safety after 2 or 3 sessions. He'd wait for her shift to end, just sitting in his car in the parking lot, and if she didn't come out fast enough, he'd storm into the building in a fury, but if she came out on time, he'd just leave. He wasn't there to pick her up, just to monitor her, which he also did through a GPS tracker he put in her car. She now has a restraining order and has moved twice. He broke into her apartment with a gun while she was asleep and just snuggled up behind her with the gun between them as if it was his eggplant, and that was how she woke up. Some other things included helping me move, but only to find out where I lived. After their breakup, he came to my door several times looking for her, and when she was generally not here, he settled for monitoring my house. He was an extreme fitness nut who was obsessed with telling people whether or not he could bench them. Hint, usually not. Lots of gaslighting, I don't remember the details. Insisted on changing her cat's name, which didn't stick. Wouldn't let her not watch TV with him, even though there are 100 things she'd rather do than watch TV at any given time, up to and including a pap smear. This inspired multiple fights. Charmed her parents so successfully that they insisted she go to couples therapy to work out their differences, which were, "I don't want to be constantly monitored, also your general controlling behavior is creepy," versus, "You have nothing to hide if you're doing nothing wrong." Ultimately, their breakup was supervised by the couple's counselor who had building security waiting in the lobby and her hand on a panic button. Who knew she'd have that? He stormed into her work when she quit post-breakup because he decided that they'd fired her and his plan was apparently to threaten them to get her job back. He took her to court to argue against the restraining order. The judge looked at Friend's documentation and how she was leaning away from him even on opposite sides of the room because he was making kissy faces at her, and he granted the order. He made very public posts on some weightlifting social media thing about what a crazy ex-girlfriend he had and linked her profile to his own profile. Good God. I guess the feeling that there was something off began approximately a few seconds into your first meeting with him. Glad she got away. Was best friends with a dude. I'm a lady. I'd been for a few years, there was no chemistry or anything like that, at least on my end. He got out of a long-term relationship and started dating around. He'd often introduce me to these ladies as a sort of barometer of whether or not he thought they were a good match. One weekend he invited a girl out with our group. She's super standoffish, won't smile, clearly isn't having a good time. I try to talk to her, get to know her, try to tell her about my friend and how great he is. She acts like I'm not there. Might as well have been the wallpaper. A month later, I'm on a date and we run into them. Remember, I'm also on a date with a man. As they're leaving, they come over to say hello. She seems equally unhappy to be alive. I introduce my dude, the three of us chat for a minute while she stands there. I jokingly tug at his shirt in a "you old dog" kind of way, and she storms out of the restaurant. Both dudes are confused. This wasn't a flirty touch of any kind, more like a bro touch. Anyway, next day at work, I work with this guy, he comes up to me and says, "Hey, you can't do stuff like that. She's really damaged. She has jealousy issues. Doesn't trust men." I apologized profusely because I didn't realize I'd done anything wrong. I even asked my date and he was baffled as well. This friend had an emergency key to my house in case I ever got locked out. He returned it a week later, citing something about, "What if you call at 2 a.m.? But isn't that the point? Isn't that what best friends do? Help each other out in times of need? Flash forward a few months in, and he refuses to speak to me. Again, we work together, won't look me in the eye. He slowly gives up other relationships, male and female. After dating the girl for 6 months, they get engaged, now married. No idea how it's going or if he's happy. I ended up moving and haven't spoken to him since. Makes me really sad to see people give up who they are for a relationship. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. He started attending college at 26, which isn't strange at all, but he insisted on living in the dorms for 3 years. It's not like we're a college town with expensive, far away, or crappy off-campus housing. He just liked the ego boost of being around kids 8+ years younger than him. My friend was 19 when they started dating. Another thing was that he was a full-time stand-up comedian with his own YouTube channel. He mostly did open mic events at bars, but couldn't stand watching other people on stage perform if it wasn't him. He would sit and seethe when my friend told him she didn't want to leave when watching other people perform. The creepiest moment was undoubtedly when my friend asked me if my boyfriend ever watched adult flicks that also featured animals. Taken aback, I said, "Frick no," and I told her that it'd be a major deal breaker for me if she did. She said, "Oh, my boyfriend told me that every guy watches it." Thankfully, they broke up last week, and I couldn't be more proud or happy for her. A bit of background, this was a good friend of ours and a previous roommate. At this point, he had moved out about a year and a half prior and we'd only had internet contact with him since. It was a meetup of old friends when we went to visit home. This was the first time we, my wife and I, met his newest girlfriend after his previous long-term relationship ended. She wasn't so bad, kind of giggling and goofy for him, since he's a bit more serious, but fine, they seem happy. We were out for dinner and her and my wife go off to the bathroom. I thought this was odd since my wife is kind of a tomboy and doesn't do the whole girls go to the bathroom to do their makeup and gossip thing, but I find out later the friend's significant other invited her to ask her a few questions about our friend. Well, after about 20 minutes went by, I realized they weren't back yet. We were both tipsy and engaged in conversation and time got away. This was a small gathering of a few couples, and one of the other girls goes in to check on them. I come to find out my friend's SO basically had my wife cornered in the bathroom, crying in her face and demanding to know why our friend had a secret crush on my wife and why he wouldn't admit it to her. After getting the recap from my wife, she said she had no clue if the girl was going to attack her or molest her since she was apparently completely against her on the wall. Apparently, it was a mixture of my wife wanting to calm her down and also being a little afraid since she was half this girl's size, and legitimately not being able to get past her that caused the long drawn-out issue. Luckily, the person going to check on them snapped the girl out of it and diffused the situation. Very bizarre. We've seen her one time since, not exactly on purpose, and she acts like the whole thing didn't happen. She apparently has no history of mental illness, but I have no clue beyond that. The first time we met her was at a bar. My boyfriend and I arrived early, so we found a Scrabble board on the game shelf and started playing. When my friend and his significant other got there, literally before even introducing herself, the SO looked at our board and said, "Wow, that's a lot of small words. Are you guys stupid?" My boyfriend and I were so stunned that we kind of just ignored the comment. Was she joking? Anyway, she unsurprisingly turned out to be a psychotic ultra B word. She sounds like a freaking casual too. Any real Scrabble player knows it's not about the length of the word, it's all about getting QI across and down, with that QI on a triple letter. I mean, I think under a certain context and from a certain perspective of established banter, it could be funny. But yeah, it's bold to try that with strangers. Oh boy. He showed bullying and manipulative behavior from day one, but it was fine because she loved him and she could change him. A year later, he had cheated at least once and was constantly threatening to take his own life if she let him. It was fine though, because really he loved her but didn't know how to express it. Year 2 and he controlled her Facebook and phone, and he decided who she could and couldn't talk to. It was romantic though, because he really just cared about her. Year 3 and he'd cheated at least 4 times, and he'd also pretended to take his own life and break up with her multiple times, after one of which she tried to actually take her own life. We had a whole intervention thing while she was in hospital, and she agreed to leave him. 2 weeks later, they were back together. "He spent $800 on my birthday gift. How could he not love me?" "Oh yeah, and I can't talk to you anymore, friend, because he says I shouldn't." She's still with him, by the way. Me and my cousin grew up together like brothers. I immediately knew his girlfriend didn't like me from the looks she would give me or how blunt she was when I tried to engage her in conversation. A few months down the line, I try and arrange a meal with my cousin. I ask him to bring his girlfriend along so we can break the ice. Everything was arranged. I showed up at the restaurant and they didn't. I was stood up and they're now married and have 2 kids. I wasn't invited to his stag night or his wedding. I was, and still am, gutted. I met my wife and invited him to my stag do. He was all paid up and I couldn't wait to see him again. It was the thing I was looking forward to the most. He didn't show. Again, gutted. He and his wife showed up to my wedding and acted as if there was no problem. It was quite strange, but I didn't care, as it was just great to spend some time with the man I'd considered my brother. We kind of kept in contact via text but never met up, even though I tried to arrange it a few times. Then my son was born. I was desperate for them to meet each other and bent over backwards to meet up. I agreed to meet at a play area so his daughters could tag along and go play, and he got to meet my son, who's named after his brother who passed away. I sat there for an hour before he messaged me to say he wasn't coming. As a final attempt to salvage some kind of relationship, I invited his family to my son's christening. I got a message an hour after it had finished to say he wasn't going to make it as his wife had arranged to do something else. That was 4 years ago and I haven't heard, seen or spoken to him since. It still makes me sad, but as long as he's happy, then that's all that matters, I guess. Just to expand a little, I have tried to contact him many times, via text, phone, Facebook message, but I haven't had a response. I don't believe he's happy, but I don't know enough about his relationship to pass comment. He has cut me off and there's nothing I can do to change that. I just hope that one day we do get a chance to sit down and talk it through, just so he knows I don't hold anything against him or her. If he wants me to be a part of his life, then great. If he doesn't, then at least he knows I still love him. When he started trying to pick fights with me in order to separate me from my cousin. We were in our mid-teens, he looked 17 or 18, very clean-cut and geeky, in a boy band sort of way, you know, the sensitive one with the glasses. He was well-mannered, respectful to our mums, but he seemed predatory to me. I didn't have the best people around me growing up, so I learned to recognize potential threats early, and this guy set off all of my danger bells. Just small things like watching too closely to see how people reacted to him, and the way his smile never reached his eyes. I wasn't rude, but I didn't fawn over him either. Once he realized that I wasn't charmed by him, he started avoiding me, telling her he didn't feel comfortable around me and she'd have to see him alone. He tried bullying me anytime he saw me, while still bragging to me that he was her protector and her white knight. Found out a few months later that he was actually in his mid-20s and had a record for stalking and trying it on with underage girls. Too bad we didn't know this before he gave her herpes. My best friend started to date this girl about a year ago. She was awesome, always seemed so nice and was very fun to be around. About 3 months into the relationship and everything was going great. Then he asked her to move in with him. The day comes to move in and I go over to help her move the heavy stuff and lo and behold she shows up with a 5-year-old. When I ask who it is, she said her son. We were blown away. She had never mentioned it and never said anything about having a kid. Her Facebook had 0 pics of her kid, no one mentioned her kid. It was a big cover-up and she basically just wanted someone to support her and the kid. He noped out of that one right then and there. That kid is super duper effed. The first time I met him was at her birthday party. He shook my hand, then proceeded to try and grind on me in front of her and her family. Then when I called him out on it, everyone said I was the problem and just jealous. A year later, it turns out he'd been cheating on her continuously and had gotten 2 girls pregnant while dating with her. What a catch. It's just a shame he's not on the dating market for the rest of us. Or maybe he is, given his record of infidelity. He hated her spending time with me, snide jokes about lesbian lovers and wondering about the true nature of our relationship. The day we met finally, he told me that muff munching can't compete with a good hard hetero screwing. Then he started insisting that I was closeted and obsessed with her. My boyfriend was just a beard. Funny thing is, I was meeting this girl after 5 months. He was scary, controlling, and insecure. 4 years later, they are sadly still together. I've given up at this point. I had a friend for years. He was an old boyfriend when we were like 15 or 16. I lost touch and finally found his number shortly after I got married. We chatted for about 5 minutes on the phone and I said I'd call back when I had more time and we could catch up. When I called back, his then-girlfriend answered the phone. She knew who I was. We were all part of the same group. She told me I was never to contact him again, told him he hated me, and she was talking because he didn't even want to talk to me. I just wanted to see how he was and tell him about my new husband. A few years after that, they broke up. She cheated. I sent him a message and found out she had done that to most of his friends and family. He was just starting to piece his life back together after she slowly secluded him. He had no clue and thought I just never called him again. When he installed some kind of app on my best friend's computer so that he could control the mouse with his phone. I think this was 2 months after I met him. 6 months into their relationship, I thought that was really messed up, but I guess, haha, it's only a joke. About a year later, he asked her to sign into Facebook to see if Facebook was working for her. Later that day, she came over worried and asked me if he could have saved her password even if she told Chrome not to save it. We kind of bounced ideas around that. No, I don't think so. I mean, unless he put a keylogger onto his computer. But that would be messed up. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did. Notable favorite, after breaking up, he also tried to pose as me on Kick so he could talk to her. He used a username that was a lot like mine, so it was easily mistaken. The whole relationship was a messy, gosh darn mess. When my husband and I were helping them move, he would only speak to or answer my husband. I had an idea of how to move some stuff up the stairs, and the guy just blew me off. So I told my husband to casually mention the same idea, and poof, it was an awesome idea, so we had to try it right there and then. He always put her down and she would just take it. In the end, he broke up with her because he felt she wasn't thin or pretty enough for him. Then he'd get mad at her for trying to move on and tried to sabotage every relationship she tried to have. I ended up ending the friendship because I couldn't stand listening to her complain about how he was treating her, and she would keep going back to him. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.